Top 10 favorite films 2024. Oh, shit. 2023. Fuck. What year is it? So those of you who know me in real life know that I always make a top 10 list every year of my top 10 favorite films. And there were a few years where I made a video top 10. And those videos got tens of views. But weirdly enough, I still get asked about them from time to time. So I'm doing a video again this year. Obviously, this is a personal list. It's a subjective list. Putting anything into a top 10 order like this when it comes to art is, of course, arbitrary. And these things are also time capsules. I don't even agree with myself in the past with these things. That's obviously not why I do it. I do it to celebrate all the really wonderful films I saw in the year. So without further ado, coming in at number 10, we have Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest, a film that could hardly even be considered a movie by the most traditional standards. It's really more like sort of an experimental art project. The whole film's concept is that we are following this German family living a fairly domestic life, all the while their home sits along the wall of a concentration camp. Virtually no music at all, and for the most part the film is shot in these sort of pulled back frames, and this all serves a purpose. It's all intentional, because even as you watch the kids play in their room, or they're entertaining in the garden, or they're celebrating a birthday, the film never lets you forget when and where we are. There's never a moment in this film where you don't hear the gunshots, the screaming, the horror that's on the other side of that wall. We see the pillars of smoke coming from the furnaces. It is haunting stuff, and it's not what you would call entertainment. It's not even what you would call a traditional kind of narrative sort of film, but it is a powerful and unique work of art. At number 9, we have Anatomy of a Fall. A woman is on trial for murder. Did she kill her husband? Was it an accident? This is the driving premise behind what essentially is a pretty by-the-numbers courtroom procedural. But what I think makes Anatomy of a Fall so special is the fact that this isn't a film that tries to sort of over-dramatize what I think a real case like this would actually be like. There's not a ton of twists and turns or anything like that. Instead, what we get is this sort of step-by-step evaluation of the evidence. You get to witness this trial and put the pieces together yourself, and you spend a lot of this movie trying to figure out if you think that this woman, who you're getting to know over the course of this film, is someone who's capable of killing her husband. Very well paced, well crafted, great stuff. At number 8, I have Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron. I don't pretend to understand all the symbolism and the world building that happens in this film, but for me, the film really was about death and loss, and about what it feels like when your entire world falls apart. If this really is his retirement movie, what a hell of a way to go out. An absolute must-see if you love animation. At number 7, I have Fallen Leaves, a movie about two kind of lower middle class people who are lonely, who find each other. And that's basically the premise of the film. It's simple and it's quiet. It's also really, really funny. It's one of those movies that if you didn't have the subtitles, you wouldn't know that you're watching a comedy. It just has this bone dry sense of humor. I love the color palette. I love the cinematography. It's just a sweet, touching, romantic little movie, and I loved it. Number 6 is The Starling Girl. This is the story of a teenage girl growing up in the Bible Belt who begins a relationship with her youth pastor. There's some undeniable similarities to a movie like The Graduate here, but I think what Laura Promett gets so right is her depiction of American evangelical communities. Apparently, she did a lot of research in Oklahoma when prepping this film, and I can tell. Some of it hit a little bit too close for comfort. I'm someone who spent a fair amount of time in places like Texas and Oklahoma growing up, and it was giving me a little bit of PTSD, if I'm being honest. Really, really love this film, and I think it deserves more attention than it got. So please check it out, Starling Girl.
At number 5, we have Barbie.
When it was first announced that Greta's next movie was going to be the Barbie movie, I had a lot of questions. Mostly, but why? But the thing about Greta Gerwig is that she is a phenomenal director and an even better writer. So I figured if she was making a Barbie movie, she probably had a really great vision for it. I love the aesthetic, the way that she pulled from the films of Jacques Demy and like MGM musicals. But of course, beyond all that, we have a film that is also a commentary on feminism and patriarchy, and it even throws a few punches at Mattel, at least to the extent that you can in a movie that's partially paid for by Mattel. And sure, maybe the film doesn't go as far as it could with its feminist ideas or whatever. Maybe it's a little basic in that regard. But at the end of the day, this is still a popcorn entertainment movie, and it's so much better than anything that I would have expected. The only reason why we even thought it was going to be good is because Greta Gerwig was directing it. The film we got is fantastic, and Greta is an ultra talented human being, and she deserves nominations. She deserves nominations. There's nominations that should have been made. But of course, we can't talk about Barbie without talking about, well, the atomic bomb. So at number 4, we have a film that deals directly with the devastation, the horror, the fallout of the atomic bomb. I am, of course, talking about Godzilla -1. Taking place in the years just after World War II, this film follows a Japanese man, a would-be kamikaze pilot who has survived the war and is trying desperately to rebuild his life. Only the war isn't over yet, as Godzilla emerges from the sea only a few years after World War II. So often when people talk about what would make a good Godzilla movie, they talk about more monsters, more fights, and less humans. But I always thought that the way to do a Godzilla movie would be to focus on the human characters, and that's exactly what this movie does. It's also worth noting that this film was made for $15 million. If this is what's possible, if this is what can be done, then what are we doing? Like, what is happening with our Godzilla, King Kong stuff? Why is that so bad and this is so good, and that costs so much more money, and this is just, it's so well made, it's so good. It's probably the greatest kaiju movie ever made. I think this is the peak of what the subgenre can offer us, and I don't think it's just a good Godzilla movie. I think it's a great film on its own merit. I think if you've never watched a single kaiju movie, a single Godzilla movie, I still think you're going to get something out of this. And at number 3, we have Martin Scorsese's Killers of a Flower Moon. You don't need me to tell you that the performances are top notch. You don't need me to tell you that the cinematography is incredible. Martin Scorsese is one of those people who you keep in the conversation for greatest American filmmaker of all time. But the real reason this film is so high up on the list was really because of just the history that it uncovers. I lived in Oklahoma for years and I never heard anything about this. The book came out in 2017, and it took Scorsese and Eric Roth years to figure out a way to tell the story for the screen. As I was leaving the theater, I thought about how even though a film can't undo the horrors of the past, it can bring some semblance of justice. It can tell these people's stories. For me, that made me really proud of the medium that I'm a part of. Film can bring the truth kicking and screaming into the light, and only a filmmaker like Martin Scorsese, could really do a story like this justice. So it's absolutely a film you have to see. At number 2, we have The Holdovers. And I'm going to be honest, I've never really been much of an Alexander Payne guy. I'm not denying his talent or his work or whatever. He's just never really been my guy. That is at least until now, because The Holdovers is absolutely phenomenal. The first thought I had watching this film was, they just don't make movies like this anymore. And I don't even mean that like aesthetically speaking, because the film does look like a 1970s film. What I'm really talking about are films that are character driven, made for an adult audience, that aim to make you laugh, make you cry, that are sentimental, that feel meaningful. Basically the movies that we sort of started to see go away as we, got more movies like Star Wars. This is the kind of movie you can watch with your parents over Christmas. Funny, it is sweet, it is heartfelt. If there's one film on my list that I just think anyone can enjoy, it's definitely The Holdovers. But of course, there was one film that for me surpassed all the rest. A movie that is so strange, so weird, so odd, that it could really only be made by one filmmaker. I am, of course, talking about Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. With a seemingly endless imagination, Yorgos has crafted some of the wildest and strangest films I've seen in the past 10 years. William Dafoe plays this Frankenstein-like mad scientist whose latest creation, Bella Baxter, is essentially a infant's mind inside of the body of a full-grown woman. It's through this sort of German expressionism, steampunk kind of lens of the world that Yorgos crafts what is essentially a coming-of-age story. As Bella sort of ventures out into the world, she discovers dancing and food and sex. She witnesses suffering and pain for the first time. And all of this is sort of contextualized through the people that she meets along the way, from the most despicable narcissistic men to older and wiser characters who have knowledge to impart to her. Poor Things also has my favorite soundtrack of the year. Jersten Fredericks composed a beautiful score that is a little bit of a lullaby, a little bit of a horror film, but it also kind of grows in complexity as the film goes on, as Bella herself grows in complexity. It's just weird and wonderful and beautiful and creative and all those things that I love about movies. So Poor Things, number 1 film of 2023 for me. But before we go, I am going to go over a few honorable mentions, because there's just obviously too many great movies in every year, and I want to talk about them really fast. I really liked Saltburn, definitely considered putting it on my list. I absolutely loved Mission Impossible. I think Tom Cruise is the Buster Keaton of our time. This mix of like stunt work with comedic, physical comedy. I just thought it was absolutely phenomenal. John Wick 4, what an absolute banger of a film. Could not have loved it more. Past Lives was really incredible. I know a lot of my friends have it on their list. I loved Priscilla. I loved Infinity Pool, American Fiction. Beau is Afraid. It was like so good. It was just kind of the ending for me where it kind of fell off. And of course, you can't talk about movies in 2023 without talking about Oppenheimer, which is a wonderful and brilliant and fantastic movie, and a movie that I really need to revisit. Just not quite on my list, and I might regret that later. Sometimes I look back on these lists and I think, God, like, how could I have excluded
Spider-Man?
But that's what this is. It's all just an excuse to talk about movies. And so I'd love to know what your favorite movies were this year. If you have a top 10 list, please share it with me. I love talking about movies, and I love celebrating them with you. So please share your favorites. And yeah, that's it for this year. So I've been Joshua Mulpoken. This has been my top 10 movies of 2023. And we're out.